I'm rapidly losing the light, so I'm going to try and film this as fast as I can. Hello, my name is Sophie and welcome to another day of Vlogmas. Today I want to talk about every book that I read as part of my book club for this year. Said I need to talk fast and then immediately stumbled over all of my words. TLDR, and I have this basically scripted in my head because I say it semi-frequently. I have a book club, it's called the Rocket Book Club, and it's essentially that when me and my husband got married in 2022, instead of having a gift list or a registry, we asked our guests to gift us a copy of their favourite book. So we had a little library of our favourite people's favourite books, and in an endeavour to read them all, we take it in turns to pick one each month that I read and he doesn't. So this is every book that we chose and I read this year. I also wanted to shout out that I have this beautiful notebook that we got, because obviously, yes, I did just hit myself in the face. We were obviously very aware that not everyone reads, not everyone has a favourite book. We tried to keep it broad and make it really clear in the invite that, you know, people could give us a cookbook or, you know, anything they felt suitable, because we didn't want anyone to be limited by budget or feel like they had to spend a lot of money on us. So we got a few book vouchers from some people, but Lucas's aunt actually gave us this beautiful notebook which I decided we should use to write the reviews of the books that we choose each month. So we have a lovely note from Lucas's aunt, and then I've put a note at the beginning kind of explaining the context, because I'm hoping this is something we can keep and treasure for the rest of our lives, so I just wanted to put a little bit of explanation at the beginning. And then I don't know how well you'll be able to see, but I've got a review for every book I've read so far this year, and I've got space for Lucas to write his reviews if he ever feels so inclined to do so. So the first book in January was my pick, and I chose the book that my best friend Katie gave to me, and it's called Enna Burning by Shannon Hale. And I actually rated this book 3 stars. It's a historical fantasy kind of romance-ish. I think there was a romance line, more fantasy than romance for sure. And I think I would have rated this higher if I'd read the first book in the series. I believe these books can be read as standalones, but this is book 2 in a series, and I think I would have understood it more if I'd read book 1. I think I would have rated it higher if I was familiar with the series, but I have put book 1 on my want to read shelf on Storygraph, so if I ever see it I will pick it up, and I would like to read it at some point so I can reread this. But the premise is, I'm just going to read the back because I'm bad at summarising, and I read this in January, so God knows. Enna's brother Leifa has found the secret to an extraordinary power, to how to make fire without a spark. He can use the ability for good if he learns to control it, but Enna can't decide if it's a power she wants for herself or one that should be extinguished forever. When their home country of Bayern goes to war, the choice becomes unbearable. Enna never imagined the warm, life-giving energy of fire could destroy anything she loves, but now she must try to save Bayern and herself before fire consumes her entirely. It was a really interesting premise. It was a kind of magic system that I hadn't seen before. I did really like the ending and the kind of power of friendship element of it. I just think it took me a bit longer to latch on to what was really going on because I hadn't read book 1. But like I say, I will read book 1 at some point, and then I would like to come back to this. And I believe the next book in the series is about a character that I actually really liked from this series. Maybe it's a series that I'll grow to love, but right now it's sitting at 3 stars just because I think I missed some of the context. But I did enjoy it. It was fun. And in February, my husband picked his first book of the book club, and he chose his best friend's book, ironically, Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. And this is a book that completely took me by surprise. I rated this 5 stars. I absolutely adored it. It reminded me how much I love dystopia as a genre. It was a really interesting take on including video games in a book, but not making a book about video games. It kind of was about video games, but it wasn't, you know? I thought the setting and the world building was so immersively believable. I thought it was incredible. The characters were generally good. The protagonist was a little bit annoying, but I think that was intentional. This was February's book, so my memories on why I loved it were hazy, but it was a book that I was surprised I enjoyed so much. It's the kind of book that I've said I probably wouldn't have picked up if it weren't for this book club and us doing this gift scheme for our wedding. It's not the kind of book that I would have bought of my own accord, let alone actually read. So to have the kind of excuse to be forced to read it worked out really well for me and I really enjoyed it. So much so that I immediately picked up the sequel and I was immensely disappointed by it, but that's another story entirely. In March it was my turn to pick again, and I chose a book which I remember reading as a teenager but I don't remember enjoying, and I didn't still have it. Like, a lot of my books are ones that I bought when I was a teenager, so I have a lot of my books that I loved growing up, and this isn't one that I kept. So I was intrigued as to why. So I read Hush Hush by Becca Fitzpatrick, and then I went on to read the other 3 books in the series, but I think it was hate reading because I think I rated book 2 2 stars, book 3 maybe 3 stars, and book 4 was 1 star, so I didn't enjoy this. I think I rated this one either 2 or 3 stars. I think the thing with reading books that are gifted to you by people you love is that you feel obliged to like them, and I always feel a bit guilty if I don't enjoy them, but I'm trying to remind myself that it's not a reflection of how I feel about that person. It's just my relationship with the book, and it's fine that we don't have the same opinions on them. This is the thing when I make book videos. I really explained the first one well, then I forgot to read the blurb of the second one, and now I'm going to read the blurb of the third one. So it's inconsistent and I'm sorry. That's all I'm going to say. For Nora Gray, romance was never part of the plan, not until Patch came along. With his easy smile and eyes that seem to see inside her, Nora is drawn to him against her better judgment, but after a series of terrifying encounters, Nora isn't sure if she can trust him. Patch seems to be everywhere she is and to know more about her than her closest friends, and when she tries to seek answers, she discovers she's right in the middle of a centuries-old battle between the immortal and the fallen, and it's time to take sides. It's a Fallen Angel book. It's a stereotypical YA fantasy romance that would have been super popular around the era of Twilight and the Hunger Games and such, but not with the same lasting power, that's for sure. I think if I'd enjoyed this as a teenager, it would be a really good nostalgic read, but because I don't have that nostalgic attachment to it. So the things that you can forgive when you're nostalgic about something, you can't when you're not. Let's use Twilight as an example. I loved Twilight when I was a kid, and now I can see the flaws in it, but I still have that little sentimental attachment to it because it was something I loved so much when I was a teenager. That's what I'm lacking in this. Though I do like the Fallen Angel concept, I would like to read more Fallen Angel books because that was kind of fun. So that was March. In April, it was Lucas's turn to choose again, and I think after Ready Player One, he wasn't really as interested in any of the other books as I was, so he picked The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which is like the autism book, right? I studied this at school in year 9, and I believe it was an interesting take on literature because the chapters are numbered in prime numbers, and an autistic narrator obviously has a different tone of voice than your stereotypical neurotypical narrator. But having reread this and done some research on the author, I think this is one of the worst presentations of autism I've ever read in literature, and especially because Mark Haddon, the author, admitted to doing literally zero research and not actually wanting to engage with the autistic community to write Christopher as his protagonist character. I believe what he meant by that is that he didn't actually want Christopher to be labelled as autistic, and he thinks that, because nowhere in this book does it say autistic, nowhere on the cover or the quotes or the back, nothing about this says or uses the word autism. But I think in the original marketing when it first came out, it was kind of broadcast that way, and it's now kind of used as almost a learning tool for autism. I think he regrets that, but also he wrote an intentionally autistic character in the most painfully stereotypical way. But I think Christopher is written as an autistic character from a neurotypical perspective, so all the things that neurotypical people find irritating and inconvenient about autistic people is what Christopher is as a character, and I hated it. I didn't enjoy it at all. I gave it 2 stars because I can appreciate it's not badly written. I'm not a fan of the author now, but technically it's not badly written, but I had a horrendous time about it, and I made a video about it on TikTok which has coming up close to 10,000 views, which is a lot for me. Now we're going to go to an absolute flip turn because people on TikTok hate this book and would probably think that after I've just slated The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which is absolutely a modern classic, I should probably slate this one too. But I rated this 4 stars and I enjoyed it thoroughly more, absolutely devoured it on my honeymoon, and that's It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I really enjoyed it. I can see people's criticisms because There's a huge subject about abusive relationships in this book. I don't think that's a spoiler to say, because obviously that doesn't really tell you anything about what actually happens in this book. It's quite an openly discussed topic from the beginning, and some people think it trivializes domestic abuse. Personally, obviously I'm in a very privileged position where I've not experienced domestic abuse, so I can't speak about it from experience, but from what I've read about the author and how she's incorporated some of her own life experience into this book, I actually think it's a little bit belittling to say that it's not a good representation of the topic. But even saying that makes me nervous, so I'm going to stop talking about it. I rated this 4 stars only because the topic was so heavy that I just couldn't enjoy it as much as I would a 5-star book. But I was really glad to have had the opportunity to read this, because I have been intrigued about Colleen Hoover and why there's so much hype around her, because she's so Marmite as an author. People love her or people hate her. A lot of people on BookTok and BookTube and such hate her. I was glad to have the opportunity to read this, and I also read the sequel, It Starts With Us, and I rated that 5 stars. So take from that what you will. I really need to stop talking about Colleen Hoover because it just keeps making me nervous. And then in June, my husband picked this book exclusively, I think, because it has the word fuck in the title, and it's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, and it's one of the first non-fiction books I think I read this year, and it really opened my eyes to enjoyable non-fiction. I've not enjoyed a lot of non-fiction in my previous reading, but I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this. When I read this, I wanted to go back and reread it immediately and actually like annotate it and tab it and make notes, and it's the first book I've actually ever felt inclined to deface in that way. The fact that I actually wanted to write in it really says a lot. I haven't done that reread yet, but I will. I rated this 5 stars. It was absolutely fantastic. I want to go back through it and learn the principles of it and burn them into my brain. Absolutely 5 stars. Cannot talk about this book more highly. Really enjoyed it. That was a fantastic pick. Thank you, Lucas. Now we have a bonus book. This wasn't one that I picked as part of the book club, but it was also a book that I owned in my own physical library. So when I picked it out of the TBR jar, technically it was working through my own TBR, but I also had a copy in the wedding library. So I had a little bonus book in June, and that was All That She Can See by Carrie Hope Fletcher. And I have such mixed opinions on Carrie Hope Fletcher as an author. I've been watching her on YouTube for probably over a decade. I love her videos. I love her as a musical theatre performer. I think she's a fantastic person, but her books are very hit and miss for me. There's a couple of her books that I've absolutely adored. Her very first book, On the Other Side, I thought was brilliant. When the Curtain Falls I really enjoyed, but this one I just found a little bit wishy-washy. It kind of wrote, for me, I think the writing style was a little bit middle grade, but then some of the concepts were, I think there was swearing in it and there was some references to sex, so it was definitely not a middle grade book, but it just felt a bit inconsistent to me. And I didn't love the magic system. I thought the romance element went from 0 to 100 with no context, and it was like, oh, they hate each other, oh, they love each other, okay, what, why, how? I was very confused. Can't remember what I rated this, but definitely not my favourite Carrie Hope Fletcher book, so we'll go with that. And I have a very battered hardback copy, so I read that one so that I could keep this one pretty. So in July, I believe it was my turn to pick, and I wanted a quick win, and I've been intrigued about this book for a while, so I picked The Butterfly Lion by Michael Morpurgo. This is a children's book that I somehow managed to completely avoid reading when I was a kid. I rated this 5 stars, and not necessarily because it was a really enjoyable reading experience, but mostly because I think it really does. It's one of those books that will stand the test of time. When I was reading this, I was thinking about how one day I'd love to be able to read it to my own children if I have them, and I think that's the kind of 5-star experience, even though I didn't have the enthusiasm for it that I did with some of my other 5-star reads, if that makes any sense at all. Really beautifully written. It's got some beautiful illustrations in as well, which is really nice, because as an adult, don't get many books with illustrations in. Really sweet, and I'm glad I've had the opportunity to finally read it. In August, it was another Lucas pick, and I think he picked this one because there's a TV adaptation. I read Codename Villain L by Luke Jennings, which is, I think it inspires the Killing Eve series, but I don't think the Killing Eve series is explicitly following the story of this book. and I really enjoyed this. I think there's only 4 chapters in the whole book. It's less than 200 pages, I think, so it's quite short, but there's only 4 chapters within it, so those chapters themselves are actually quite long. And with this book I actually got my first audiobook from my library, which is very exciting. So I co-read this, I listened to the audiobook and read this with my eyes, and I really enjoyed it. I want to read the rest of the series. It's one of those where I definitely think the whole series could have been put into one book, because obviously this is quite short. It was one of those that almost felt like it didn't have an ending. I hate when books call it a cliffhanger but actually they just don't have an ending, and this felt a little bit like that. But I really enjoyed it. I've not really read a lot of, I suppose you'd call this a thriller, kind of like a crimey, thrillery thing. And I don't tend to lean towards a lot of those kinds of books, but I did really enjoy this. It will not make me watch the show, however, because I think that will just make me too anxious. The show looks stressful, and I can take that in a book, but definitely not in a TV show. Then in September, it was back to my pick, and I thought, you know what? September's my birthday month. It always feels like a new start because it's the start of the new school year, end of the summer, that kind of thing. So I picked Good Vibes, Good Life by Vex King. Except I hated this. I'm gonna have to read my review on this one because I don't really remember a whole lot about it because I banished it from my brain. With how much I enjoyed The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, I thought I would like this too, but I really didn't. I felt like I didn't read any of it. I wasn't engaged at all, and what I did retain, it was nearly 300 pages of repetition about good vibrations. Considering how emphatic the author is about what a difficult upbringing he had, his advice was naive, oversimplified, and appeared to come from a real position of privilege. The implication that an entrepreneur who wouldn't quit their job to take their leap is a negative gave me no good vibes. I think the problem is that he is a spiritual man and I'm not a spiritual person, so definitely not my vibe. If this book gives you a new perspective on life and makes you feel like you can take life by the horns and, you know, go on and do great things, I'm thrilled for you. I really am. It just didn't feel like that for me, which was good to learn because there were a couple of other Vex King books that look like things that I would like to buy, and I now won't buy them. Moving into the last quarter of the year, in October, I think this was Lucas's choice, and he chose The Wind in the Willows. Yes, it was his choice. This is another children's book that completely escaped me as a child, and I really thought that I would be able to get through this in an afternoon, but it turns out I think it's nearly 200 pages, and even though there are some pictures, this took me like 4 days to get through. It was more difficult than I anticipated. I didn't really enjoy it, and I can tell you why, because I'm too autistic. All the things that made Toad an unlovable character were things that all the other characters would go, "Oh Toad, how silly of you," and I'm like, no, Toad's being a bitch. I just found him really annoying, and the part of my brain that is autistic just couldn't forgive him for that. I can appreciate how it's a classic. I liked the illustrations. I can see how it's a timeless tale that will be part of our culture forever. You know, I've seen a stage musical version of Wind in the Willows, and I can see the parallels. I just didn't particularly enjoy it, but I do think this edition is beautiful. I think this is the first ever cloth-bound classic I owned. It's a Bath Treasury of Children's Classics. I've read it now, so at least there's that. Then November saw our wedding anniversary, so we decided to do something a little bit different because I felt we should do something special, because the one thing our library doesn't have is our own favourite books. And I've said this to Lucas before, and I said if we were invited to a wedding where this was the gift option, what would you pick? And he said, oh, I really don't know. He doesn't have a favourite book, not because he doesn't read, but because he just can't pinpoint a favourite. So we decided that in November, and we'll make this a tradition going forward, we will introduce a new book into the library, which I think will be a nice way to keep it growing, keep it kind of consistent with us. But it also happened to be the same month that the Fourth Wing sequel Iron Flame came out. So our book club pick for November was Iron Flame, which is so fat. Oh my god, it's so big. Was this an excuse to read Iron Flame? Yeah, probably, but it's our book club, so we can do what we want. Like I said, Iron Flame is the sequel to Fourth Wing, which is a book about Violet who goes to like a war college and trains to be a dragon rider, even though she's trained all her life to be a scribe, and she gets shoved into the dragon rider quadrant by her mother, who is the general. I think that's the briefest summary I can give. It's also a very bad summary, but that's not the point. So this is book 2. It follows on from the cliffhanger left in book 1. I rated this 4 stars. I didn't think it was as engaging as book 1, but I think it does set up for what I believe is going to be a 5-book series. The best part about this whole book for me is the reading experience with my husband and the fact that he actually read this one and we enjoyed it together. I think it starts a nice little tradition that we'll pick a new book each year on our anniversary, and that will be the book club pick for the month. That is a little bit embarrassing, isn't it? Just a little bit. And then the December pick for our book club was my choice. I've not finished it yet. I'm about halfway through, but I'm currently reading My Policeman by Out of Focus. By Bethan Roberts. I don't have anything insightful to say about this yet because I've not finished it. I'm approximately halfway through. At this point I would give it a solid 3.5, 4 stars. I don't do half-star ratings, but I feel like 4 stars is too high but 3 stars is too low. That's roughly where I'm at the moment. Obviously I've not finished it yet. I'll have a more conclusive review when I've finished it. Maybe I'll leave space to put in my final star rating in the edit, because by the time I edit this I will have finished it. There were 2 main reasons I picked this for December book club. One, Harry Styles is on the cover. I'm not going to pretend I'm any less shallow than I am. That's why I picked it. But also because the friends that gave us this book at the wedding, there's a little trio of us, and obviously there's me, Stephanie, who gave me this book, and friend Nicola, who gave us this book. So I also felt like I needed to read this book to complete the trilogy. The trio, the group. I'd read Nicola's book, so I felt I needed to read Stephanie's book. And at this point, that's the only kind of reason I need to choose a book. I'm trying really hard with the book club not to pick the books I'm most excited about, because otherwise I'm going to end up with a bunch of books that I'm not excited about, and I don't really want to put that on any of the people that bought us those books. So I'm trying to be really random. But that is everything that I read for my little solo book club this year. I'm really looking forward to doing this again next year. Actually, we're going to continue taking it in turns. Obviously we'll pick a new book in November to buy, and then also my mum gave me a box set of the famous 5 books as part of her wedding gift to us, so I want to read one of those each month as well. So I'm going to be reading 2 book club books a month, really upping the stakes here. That was everything. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow for another vlogmas video. Bye!